Today I'm going to show you how I make these earrings using brick stitch on the inside of a hoop. I use these arch hoops to make it, but you can do it with any hoop you want. You can do it with large circle hoops or with smaller ones, depending on what size you want it to be and what size beads you're working with. You can use a regular beading thread, but I prefer to use Fireline because it holds its form really nicely. The next thing you'll need is needles. You can use size 12 like I'm using here, or size 10 will also work. For beads, I'm using size 11 Miyukis and check beads. I find Miyukis are best for this because of their consistency. And you'll also need some good sharp scissors to cut the Fireline. I have 1 yard of Fireline on my needle. You may need more if yours is bigger. To get started, grab one bead and move it down your thread. We want to make sure to leave about 4 to 6 inches excess on the end because we're going to use this to secure our beadwork at the end of the project. Grab your hoop, and what we're doing is wrapping our thread around the hoop and then going through our bead, creating kind of a slip knot effect. You'll see once I pull it tight that all we've done is just create a little loop around our frame. It may slip around a little bit, just hold on to the thread with your fingers to make sure that it stays secure. Then we're going to grab another bead and do another loop. So I'm going to put it down to the base next to my other bead and then wrap it around. So you can see I have the thread going over and then I'm putting my needle back around and through the bead, like so. Now we're going to repeat this process all the way around our frame until we have our desired amount of beads on it. And here I'm using my thumb and pointer finger of my left hand to hold the frame and to hold the beads in place. Once we have around 5 or so beads looped onto our hoop, you're going to find you won't have to hold them as much because they'll be a lot more secure. But just for these first steps, make sure to hold it nicely. Now while I bead this hoop, I just want to remind you to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me with the YouTube algorithm and helps more people discover my channel. You can see on my hoop that I have a little hole at the top, and that's fine. All you're going to do is just go through that hole when you do the loop through if yours has one. And here is our first base row all done. Now to start our second row, we're going to use the loops created from our last row. So you can see here I've got these loops, and what we're doing is taking 2 beads to start this next row. To start our next row, we're going to take 2 beads, and I want to reduce the number of beads per row, which means I'm going to go through the second loop. And then I'm going to pull it nice and tight. And you'll see they're not going to lay perfectly yet, but you can use your fingers to manipulate the beads and have them lay nicely like this. Then you're going to hold on and just go up through that second bead. This secures it to our first row, like so. And now we have begun our second row. So now we're going to take 1 bead at a time for the rest of the row. And we're just going to repeat that process going on the next loop each time. So you can see here, I go through the loop and pull it nice and tight. And then we're just going to put our needle back up through the bead. And you'll see that it just pulls it and secures it right onto that base loop, like so. And again, we're just going to repeat this all the way around the hoop. Now, the main thing that you need to take away from this video and from this method is that when you're working with an inside of a curve like this, in order for it to lay flat, we need to reduce the amount of beads that we have on each row. So you can see here, it's getting a little bit jumbled, and I don't have room to fit my next bead on the closest stitch, so we're actually going to skip a stitch and go to the next loop to link it on. This is going to help your beadwork look more flat. If you find that it's bunching, you might need to undo a stitch or two and then skip a loop to make it work. This is all going to be from trial and error, so I can guide you a little bit, but it's going to be mostly up to your judgment. To start our next row, I'm going to show you how to add an extra bead to a new row. So again, we're taking 2 beads to start our next row, but this time instead of going on the second loop, we're going to go on the first loop, like this. And I'm doing this because I want the bottom of the beads of the rainbow shape that I'm making to look relatively straight, even if it has a little bit of a zigzag, instead of it going inward at a curve. And then we're just going to go up through the bead like we usually do. like so. Now this is optional. You can definitely do it the same method we did for the last row if you want, or you can do it the way that I'm doing it. I like how it looks with the effect that I'm trying to get for this particular design. Now again, keep repeating the process one bead at a time through the next loop, skipping loops when you find that is getting crowding, or I often find you have to do it kind of around the apex of the curve. And the more rows you go in, the more skips you're probably going to have to do. I think on average, I do 2 to 4 skips per row as I get closer in, depending on the size of the bead and whatnot. As you're working on this, you'll find it easier to see exactly where you should skip and where you shouldn't. Okay, there is our third row. To start our fourth row, I'm going to add a bead again. So this time I'm going through the first loop and then up through the bead. For my fifth row, I want to reduce a bead, so I'm going to go through the second loop and then just keep repeating the process. So you can see the pattern I've done here. It's starting to show on the base of my rainbow, the little zigzag to make it look more straight versus having it as a diagonal going in towards the center. Okay, and to finish off, to secure and create kind of a knotting effect, we're just going to take our needle and thread and weave it through all of our bead weaving that we've done. So you can see here, I'm just kind of going through and zigzagging it, creating enough tension that I don't have to worry about the thread coming out or the beads not being held securely. So repeat this as much as you'd like. And what I'm actually doing here is using it to pull this gap a little bit closer where I skipped, because I found there's a little bit of a gap right there. So I just pull it nice and tight, and then it looks a lot nicer. Once you've completed your weaving, then you're just going to trim off the excess thread, and then we're going to repeat that process again with the tail we left at the beginning of the project. I'm also going to place the earring on my table, and then I'm just going to use my fingers to rub it a little bit just to secure the beads, make sure they're nice and flat, and get rid of any lumps or bumps. Now I'm just going to weave the tail through and cut off the excess, and there you go. There are our finished earrings all done. I hope this tutorial helped you out, and if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Leave any comments down below, future tutorials you'd like me to do, and make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.